Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this webinar on best practices for conversion of legacy Flash courses to HTML5. My name is Rohan, and I'm the host and moderator for today's session. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce you to our presenter for today, Mr. Rahul Singh. Rahul is the Senior General Manager at Harbinger. He is a digital learning enthusiast and is passionate about helping organizations and leaders solve business challenges through innovation of learning technologies. In his career span of over 12 years in the digital learning space, he has helped a host of global organizations cutting across industry verticals in implementing a myriad of new initiatives around their digital learning strategy. And before I call Rahul, just a few housekeeping tips. Ensure you have selected the right speaker for audio output. Test your speaker to ensure it is working fine from the audio settings option on the lower left corner of your screen. If necessary, dial in using a phone. The dial-in numbers are available at the given link. All attendees will be on mute by default. Please raise your hand if you have any query or post it in the chat window. A recording shall be made available to all attendees within a few working days. Questions can be posed through the Q&A panel, and moderators will try to attend all questions during the session. Just in case if any unanswered questions are there, we'll be happy to send it through a follow-up email. The duration for the session would be approximately 45 minutes. The first 30 minutes are for the presentation, and we would utilize the last 15 minutes for questions. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in the Zoom control panel, and I'll be happy to bring them up for Rahul to answer. Now, without further ado, we will have Rahul take over. Welcome, Rahul.
Thank you very much, Rohan. And once again, a very warm welcome to all the webinar attendees on behalf of Harbinger Interactive Learning. Thank you very much for taking the time out today to attend this webinar. We would definitely like this to be an interactive session. So please feel free to share your thoughts, questions during the webinar, and we would love to discuss them with you. So before we get started, let me give you a brief overview of Harbinger Interactive Learning. We are a global design and development company specializing in e-learning modernization, custom content development, artificial intelligence-based solutions, and designing unique learning experiences. We have more than 28 years of operational expertise led by an experienced leadership team. All right, so first of all, let's talk about what is modernization. What do we mean when we say modernizing content? Well, this is a methodology through which legacy learning material could be made available in formats which are more suited to the needs of the modern day workplace and the modern day learner. Some examples of legacy content. So they could be courses which were developed in proprietary Flash authoring tool, or they would have been developed using traditional authoring tools with a Flash output. They could also be your instructor-led training materials, your PPTs, your student guides, your instructor guides. They could be lengthy courses which are like an hour, 2 hours long in nature, and webinar recordings, which we are currently using for learning purposes. Once they are put through the modernization process, they can be made available in multiple formats. They could be made available as HTML5 responsive courses, which are accessible on your mobile devices. They could be broken down into instructionally sound microlearning nuggets. And these microlearning nuggets could be implemented via nudge learning. We could also bring in artificial enabled chatbots for the learning piece, which can push these microlearning nuggets. Or we could have videos, short videos explaining the key concepts or the key learning objectives. Now, what is the need for modernization? What are the factors that are driving this? So we all would acknowledge the fact that digital transformation is disrupting industry after industry, and the learning and development industry is not untouched. we are also experiencing the digital transformation in a very rapid and disruptive manner. Well, one of the key concerns which everyone would be aware of the fact is that Flash is slated for sunset in 2020, by end of 2020, which primarily means, you know, running these Flash courses on these modern day browsers and devices would be like literally next to impossible. There are some other drivers of change as well, changes as well. So there are a lot of technology updates happening around us. There are a plethora of new browsers, devices, and operating systems coming into picture, and the way learners are consuming those content on their mobile devices or handheld devices. It's also the workforce learning needs. The modern day learner needs to consume content in a particular way. The learning has to be made available in the flow of work. And then there are changing regulations, standards, compliances, and some of these other factors which are driving the need for modernization. Well, let's look at these two pieces of news snippets. These news snippets are from a couple of popular browsers, Chrome and Firefox. Well, officially, Flash is slated to be sunset by end of 2020, but these popular browsers have already started, calling the curtains on Flash, and they have stopped supporting the Flash content. So sooner than later, it's important for us that we initiate our modernization journey so that we can, modernize our Flash courses or legacy-based courses. Now, before we get started with the modernization journey, there are some important factors to consider. How do we make decisions whether the courses, the legacy learning material that we have, should we modernize them? Are they relevant? Should we retire them? Well, there could be multiple factors, but today for our discussion, we are bringing out like 4 relevant factors. First thing is how relevant that course is today in terms of instruction. So instructionally, how relevant that content is. What is the current market requirement for that course? Are there people who are willing to consume those courses, buy those courses? We can also look at user enrollment data for each course. So depending upon the popularity of the courses and higher the enrollment rate of a particular course, the probability of qualifying it for a modernization initiative becomes higher. And then eventually we can also look at the user feedback, probably for a time period of last 6 to 12 months, which the users, the actual learners would have given after taking the course. And we could consider all these aspects, and based on the outcomes of these aspects, we could take a decision whether a particular course qualifies for modernization or should it get retired. Right, so once we have identified our bunch of courses or bucket of legacy learning material which needs to get modernized, so what is the starting point? How do we get started? So at this stage, we bring you the XSmart Framework. This framework is designed specifically to drive your content modernization initiative. Now let's take a deeper dive into what this XSmart Framework is all about, what it does, how it can help us. So the X factor, first let's look at the X factor. This is the first layer of the modernization framework. The X factor here today stands for automation. The faster we are able to figure out the role that automation can play, easier the modernization journey would be for us. Automation ensures that the modernization strategy is executed in a rapid and cost-effective manner. Now let's look at the second layer of the framework. And this second layer, typically talks about the design of the modernized content. This also gives us an opportunity to align our strategy, business strategy, with actual development process. The second layer is SMART, and let's take a deep dive into this level. S here stands for searchable. Now we have all been hearing about how learning needs to happen in the flow of work, or we need to make learning available at the point of need for the learner. how do we make this possible? Well, a key aspect to ensure that the learning is available in the flow of work and at the point of need, it's important that the content is easily searchable. Today, we might be designing our content to be delivered through an LMS, but what if we have to deliver it through a mobile application? Does it mean we need to go through the process of designing the content again? Well, the answer is no if we are using the XSmart framework as a guiding tool. Modernization is an opportunity for us to make our content easily searchable. It could be achieved in two simple steps: instructionally identifying key learning objectives and metadata tagging of content with relevant keywords. Now let's move on to the second feature of the SMART framework. That's M, where it stands for micro. We all understand the importance of micro-learning nuggets in today's context. But at the same time, let's acknowledge that not every online course or every digital learning material needs to be delivered as a micro-learning nugget. For example, a certification program might be best delivered as a 2-hour course. So how do we solve this dilemma whether to go macro or micro? Well, the beauty of the XSmart framework is that it enables you to address both these concerns in one go. While modernizing the 2-hour-long course, we are able to identify key learning objectives and pull them out as standalone SCORM packages, which could be made available at the time of need. So that's the micro piece. Now, it's A, which means accessible. And accessibility is all about inclusiveness, a way to ensure that no one is excluded. The XSmart framework ensures that modernized content is available for everyone, whether it is Section 508 or VCAC 2.0 or any other geography-specific accessibility standard. We recommend to implement them at a template level. And for any particular modernization initiative, we generally use a set of pre-developed templates, and these compliance standards are set at a template level. This is yet another improvisation which contributes to the rapid development process. Next is R for responsive. It's basically making the content available on handheld devices, mobile devices, because we all understand today that apart from communication and entertainment, there's also a lot of learning that is happening on these mobile devices. Responsive e-learning design is all about giving an optimal user experience, especially at times when your user, the learner, is also experiencing stuff like Netflix. And then there's T, which is trackable and trackable beyond SCORM. The good old SCORM has been around for a long time and would probably continue being there for a longer time. But at times, there is only so much insights that a SCORM package can bring. Stakeholders at multiple levels are looking for more flexibility and deeper analytics on learner behavior and performance. These additional insights can help us in continuous improvement of our digital learning strategy. The XSmart framework enables you to think beyond SCORM and implement additional tracking capabilities to generate detailed analytics and insights. One such example is XAPI. Of course, this has to be supported by relevant technology infrastructure such as a LRS or a learning record store or a custom application with robust backend to capture detailed analytics. But the beauty of XSmart framework is that enables you to take this plunge and generate powerful analytics while you are on your modernization journey. So we'll take a pause here and request our audience if they have any questions or thoughts specifically directed towards the XSmart framework. And if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box. All right, so it seems there are no questions, so let's move ahead with our agenda. Now we have the framework as a guiding tool. Now, what we need is a development process, a development methodology. This is here we bring the 4D development methodology for modernization projects. What does this means, the 4D? So 4D stands for define, design, develop, and deliver. Let's look at some of the let's look at these four aspects: the define, design, develop, deliver in detail. Well, the define stage is one of the important and the most crucial stages of the entire modernization journey. This phase is the foundation for any modernization project, and it kicks in as soon as project scoping begins. It ensures that short and long-term business objectives are tied with the outcomes of the project. Some of the questions that would be asked or would be probed at this stage are like, are the stakeholders looking for as-is conversion? What type of conversion are we anticipating in terms of when we are migrating Flash-based courses to HTML5 courses? Does this project needs subject matter expertise involvement? If yes, what level of SME expertise does it requires? And does the customer has that subject matter expertise available with them, or is there a is there a workaround? Then what is the go-to-market plan? Is there a set timeline that we are trying to achieve in this development process through which we want to make our library of courses, the modernized courses, made available to our learners? Then we'll also contemplate on what type of tool or technology preference. Do we want to go the custom HTML5 route, or do we want to use any other popular authoring tool for development? And what are the compliance needs? Do we need Section 508 or VCAC 2.0 or any other such compliance needs? There is a possibility, distinct possibility, that for some of these questions, we might not have immediate answers. And that's perfectly fine in the define phase. At least there would be no ambiguity on the knowns and unknowns as we move forward from the design phase, because we would have listed down the questions and we would have a knowledge as to what could be coming at us. So once we have defined what we are trying to do, then we get into the design mode. This basically, in this phase, we look at the key areas where we focus prior to getting into the development phase. So how do we communicate with each other? In the traditional e-learning development process, we have storyboards for communication between the development team and the stakeholders and the subject matter expertise. In the modernization process, we are replacing the storyboard with a changelog. So the design of the changelog format is critical, which has a buy-in from both the teams, the customer and the development team. Then we also have the how do we design templates to maintain consistency across the courses. So for this, what typically happens is the legacy courses get analyzed and the instructional design team comes up with a set of templates that needs to be developed that could cater to the development needs of that entire section of courses or entire library of courses. Then if we are doing the custom HTML5 framework or tool selection, if we have zeroed down on a particular tool, or if we are going the custom HTML route, then that is helpful for designing the templates. We also create the quality checklists for various combinations. What is the environment for which these courses are to be tested, and the compliance standard selection. Then we move into the development phase. In the development phase is we bring in automation at a couple of stages. Let's assume that a scenario wherein the courses do not have source files. So does it mean that we have to redevelop all those assets? And by assets, we mean that, it could be audio files, it could be video, text, image, all these type of files. So whether we have to redevelop it or we can reuse it, the advantage would be if we are able to reuse it, and that is where we bring in automation to extract media assets from the existing legacy courses. Then the instructional designers start creating the change logs wherein they suggest what changes are to be made to a particular course at a screen level. The change logs get reviewed and approved by the stakeholders, the subject matter experts. And once the change logs are reviewed and approved, then again, we have the template library created. So, and we have the content extracted. So again, we'll bring in automation to develop courses while reusing media assets. And then they go through the quality testing process, wherein the content is mapped to the legacy course to ensure that the correct content has been migrated. And it will also be tested against the other compliance standards if we have set in anything, or the typical SCORM features for the LMS. And once the courses are tested, then we get into the delivery phase, wherein there could be multiple scenarios. We are deploying the courses on live systems, and also trying to bring in ability to make these courses white labeled if they have to be used by multiple customers at your end. And also bring in ability to customize parts of courses, very specific parts of courses based on end user needs. So all this would fall under the delivery phase. And with this, this 4D process complements the XSmart framework in a very good manner, which enables us to go through this entire modernization journey. Now then, now in this 4D process, there are some very specific terms that we have used. For example, the first one is that we said that we would replace storyboards with change logs. So let's take a deeper dive into this as to what do we mean by a change log? What does a change log actually looks like? So this is a example of a change log, and what it typically does is it enables the development team to identify the specific changes that they are suggesting in a course at a particular screen level. And then this changelog is given to the reviewer team, who reviews this information and confirms that, yes, this is the way to go. And now let me bring up a sample of the changelog for all of us to look at. So this is something which we have created in an XLS sheet. So for example, you would see that, we start with the screen title. So for example, this is the program overview, and then new screen number. So in the modernized course, what would be the screen number for this particular screen title? Are we changing the screen title? So I think in this case, we are changing the screen title. Instead of program overview, we are saying course overview. And then status change required. What type of change is required? So template migration. So what is the existing template that we have? The existing template is text and image. What should be the modernized template? So we will use the launch template. So these are the type of changes that get recommended in a typical change log. Right, so now let's move ahead from change log and let's look at the other aspects of this modernization process. So coming back to the presentation. Templated approach. So why are we suggesting that we go with a templated approach, template design? So this approach basically is for scalability and reusability. In a typical conventional e-learning project, what we will typically do is the instructional designers, when they create a storyboard, and based on the storyboard, the development team would create specific templates or screens. At Harbinger, we have flipped this approach for modernization. So we analyze legacy courses, and based on the results of the analysis, we create a template library. And this template library is the guiding factor for modernization of courses. So you can correlate it to the change log that in the template change that we did was from text to image screen. We were saying that we'll use a launch screen. So on your screen now, you will see a typical laundry list of the templates that would have been developed for a particular modernization project. And this is not hard coded that there is only X number of templates that could be developed. It totally depends upon the analysis outcome of the legacy courses as to what type of templates that needs to be developed and what is the final output that we are looking to. Now, after templates, moving ahead to the automation piece, we spoke in the 4D process during the development phase that we are bringing in automation. So let's look at how we are bringing in automation, when we are bringing in automation, and what is the value add that automation is bringing to our entire process. So let's assume that we have our legacy courses. They are either, developed in proprietary Flash tool, and then there are, in some cases, we have the source files. In some cases, we do not have the source files. So depending upon the type and the nature of the legacy courses, we'll be able to write automation utilities, and these automation utilities will be able to extract the media assets. These automation utilities are called the Smart Extractor, and these media assets are text, images, audio, videos, and these the extracted content would be populated in a folder structure, and that folder structure is clearly defined for at a screen level. So for every screen, for let's say for screen 1, we have X number of text files, X number of images files. So once they are stored in this typical folder structure, then the HTML5 framework that we are using, that will have an XML architecture at the back end. And this XML architecture will be able to hold this content, the extracted content. So the XML architecture, the folders would be populated with this extracted content. And this is again a step wherein we can bring in the automation for the development piece. And once the XML folders are populated with the extracted content, then the course is published and we have the responsive HTML5 course as an output. Now, in our presentation earlier, we were also talking about microlearning. So this is a way, how can we use modernization initiative to future-proof our content? Today, we might not have the need for microlearning, but what if tomorrow we have that need? So when we are going through the modernization initiative, is it a wise decision to also think about future-proofing the content by making it available as microlearning nuggets? Through our framework and the development methodology, yes, it's pretty much possible and very streamlined process. We look at the process, how it goes about. So we are again looking at that changelog, and let's focus for a moment on the yellow highlighted sections. So these are particular screens. And then out of these screens, we have identified the key learning objectives, which we can see under the microlearning nugget title section. And these sections wherein we have given the microlearning nugget title, these can be made available as standalone microlearning packages. And the metadata tagging will make them searchable. So if someone types solenoid actuator, they would be able to get these 3 learning nuggets would be made available on their search. So it's not just micro, but making it searchable as well. And then the compliance standards, adding compliance standards at the template level. How do we do this? So again, we come back to the changelog process. So over here, we see that in this particular case, we are implementing section 508. And one of the features in the section 508 is to have alt text for images. So for example, if you look at the yellow highlighted section, those are the alt text for the images. So in this particular case, the third one, wherein we have the topic is electric actuators learning objectives. The modernization template is text and image, which means it has got an image. And for that image, the alt text is provided by the instruction designer, and that gets implemented at the development level. So At the template level, we have already implemented the section 508 standards, and at the change log, the instruction designers are able to write the specifics in terms of alt text and other features, so that in the development phase, we do not have to work on each and every screen for doing it. So it all ties down very well together. All right, so now is the time for us to look at a few modernization samples. But before that, let us take a pause here and let's see if we have any specific questions on the 4D development methodology or the change logs or some of the other things that we just spoke about. Right, so there are a few questions that we see. So one of the questions is, when you say automated, what percentage of automation have you been able to achieve with XSmart and in what specific areas? Well, till date, we have experienced that we have been able to bring in automation in terms of content extraction for at least about 80% of the cases in a ballpark across 7 to 8 different type of tools, legacy tools. So it could be proprietary Flash, Articulate Presenter, Engage, Captivate, Lectora, these type of sections. The second question is, while a course may have a pretty standard or templatized structure, templates, layouts, etc., how do you cater to complex interactions such as simulations or games within courses for modernization to HTML with XSmart, and are they automated? That's a very good question, and thank you very much for bringing that up. So we'll answer this question in two parts. First part is, let me try and answer the complex interaction piece. So if there are complex interactions, then probably there are two ways at which they could be handled. There could be more ways, but the two ways which come at the top of the head are, one is, if they are pretty complex in nature, we'll have to repurpose them or recreate them basically. Or else, if we can live with the fact that we lose on the interaction piece, but still at a concept level, we can use that interaction piece and render it as a MP4. I mean, it's also a business decision apart from the user experience decision. If we have like 100 courses and all of those courses have 5 complex interactions each of 2 minutes each, so that becomes a huge volume for recreating. So can we live with the fact that we lose on the interaction piece, but from a concept perspective, they are available as MP4 videos for us in our courses. And in terms of games, they will have to be, more or less, they will have to be recreated. And there could be still some possibility of automation in terms of extracting media assets which could be reused. But in terms of development, the automation process will be relatively lower as compared to the standard modernization project. All right, so let's move ahead and let's look at a few modernization samples now. Okay, so the course that we are looking at right now is a Flash course, a legacy course. This is how the course actually looked like. Right, so we have experienced the legacy course, the look and feel, and the design of the course. Now let's experience the modernized course. So this is how the modernized course looks like with the new templates and design style. These are the different templates that would have been created during the design phase. So this was an example of a Flash to HTML5 conversion. Now, there are also some other examples which we wanted to bring up today in terms of modernization. What are the other aspects of modernization? What could be done? So let's look at some of those examples. So we had a legacy course on a particular topic, on a topic of Teller's Essentials, and we created different learning modalities out of it. So this is an example of an AI-enabled chatbot, which helps the learner in the learning piece. So let's start with the conversation, and the chatbot is Eva. So the learner starts the communication, and the chatbot says, okay, how may I help you today? So let's say I have to do a course on communication. So where can I find a course on communication? So the chatbot, Eva, gets a little specific and she asks a pointed question. And based on the response the learner gives, she pulls up a microlearning nugget on what is communication, which the learner can experience within the chat conversation itself. So this is a case of wherein we have taken an existing legacy course and created microlearning nuggets out of it and made it available through AI-enabled chatbots.
What is communication?
Now let's look at some other examples. So this is an example of an infographic wherein a key learning objective within the legacy course was identified, and this key learning objective is delivered in the form of an infographic. And another example wherein a quiz has been created for the learner. Right, so in these examples that we saw, to summarize, we saw an example of a Flash to HTML5 conversion. Then we saw examples wherein, different type of learning modalities were created out of an existing e-learning course. There was an infographic, there was a quiz, and then there was a learning through AI-enabled chatbot. All right, so now we have looked at the samples. Now let's move ahead with our discussion. And this is the last slide before we open up for the Q&A. Now the next pertinent question would come up is, okay, so we understand that we have to modernize, we understand the need, we understand what is the framework, what is the development methodology, and what could be the various outputs from the modernization process. But do we do this in-house or do we outsource? Well, there are some factors which should be considered before taking this decision, and some of those factors are, what is more important for your internal team? Is it working on new product development, working on development of new courses, servicing your existing customers, solving their problems, or modernizing legacy courses. Also, we all acknowledge the fact that this is a temporary exercise. This modernization initiative would not go for too long. So are you willing to ramp up your internal team temporarily? And what would that team do after your modernization initiative is over? Does your in-house team have the relevant skill set for this task? And the other question would be that if you intend to bring in a third-party expert, what should be the criteria or what should be the key factors to consider before bringing them on board? So these are some of the factors which will help us decide whether it's best to do in-house or utilize a third-party provider to help you with your modernization journey. So with this, Rohan, I hand it over to you for the Q&A session.
Sure, Rahul. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and take some questions now. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the question box in your control panel.
Right, we have a question and it says that who maintains the courses once modernized? Well, maintenance is a key aspect and we consider that very strongly. And that is one of the reasons that the framework that we use to modernize these courses is easy to update and maintenance. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of who could maintain this. In a lot of cases, we have given the entire knowledge transfer to our customers and have trained their members on their side in their team in terms of how to maintain and update these courses. And there are times when the customer would want us to keep the maintenance and updation piece. So it's possible both ways. Right, the next question that we have is, what if we do not have source code? Well, what we have experienced till now is based on the multiple modernization projects that we have done across 7 to 8 different tools, which includes proprietary Flash, Articulate Presenter, Engage, Captivate, Lectora. Around about 80% of the course cases wherein source files were not available, we have been able to extract content through automation utilities, because that makes the process faster and rapid. And then in the remaining cases, we have been able to extract the content manually. So extraction has been possible, but it's just that 80% has been automated and 20% has been manual.
All right. It looks like we've covered all our questions. In case you have any follow-up questions, please do drop us a line at the email IDs mentioned on the screen, and we would be glad to answer them for you. Rahul, is there anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap up?
No, I think we have covered everything. Thank you.
Great, great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here today, and you'll be receiving an email with a link to the recorded session shortly in a few days. Thanks again for joining us today, and have a great day ahead.